the outstanding Neal Coolong. Sir, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me in this beautiful end of May day. I hope you guys' Memorial Day weekend was good.
Yeah, hope yours was great. Ours was terrific, so thank you. All right. So here we are. It's OTA times, one of the slowest times of the year in the NFL. Before I get to personnel, when the NFL, there's a lot of talk about the NFL possibly bagging the Pro Bowl. Every player that you talk to, Neal, wants to be named to the Pro Bowl. You never hear of anybody saying they want to play in it. Is that a fair statement?
Generally speaking, yeah. And the reason for that is simple. I mean, they're two different questions, really. You want to be named to the Pro Bowl team. It's not that they want to be on the roster. It's that they want the bonus that's probably in their contract. I would imagine a good bit of the back and forth between ownership and the union surrounding the Pro Bowl has something to do with that. If players are going to continue to not play in the game the way they are, the league wants to do away with it because they don't want to pay bonuses if the players aren't even going to show up to the game. They're not getting anything out. The league isn't getting anything out of it. It's empty. There's just not really much of a point, considering you've already played the game. I would imagine if the architects of the game blew everything up and were rebuilding it, they wouldn't have a Pro Bowl game. They would have some type of distinction, and the value of that bonus just might not be there as much anymore. But now that you have all the history that comes with it, those bonuses aren't going to leave a contract. At the same time, I don't see why a compromise on it can't be reached, except, and this is something you and I have talked about a lot, people still watch the Pro Bowl.
I know.
Even if it's just to complain about it, they still watch the Pro Bowl. The league doesn't necessarily want to just get rid of it, but they would like to have, the most amount of their biggest stars participating in some way. It's just tough to do that when right now you're doing it before the Super Bowl. You used to do it after. You might not have gotten all of the players from each Super Bowl team, but you could have gotten some of them at least. I'm not sure if this way works the best for everybody, but I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I just know it's one of those situations in which whatever the alternative is going to have the same amount of flaws as the current system. So I don't really see much of a point in changing it because nothing is going to be better. Everyone's going to come up with, well, what about this? Just some pie in the sky idea that's just stupid and won't work. And you have to keep in mind this game, it's not free for the players, but a lot of them, especially at that level, they're taking a significant pay cut to play in it. Plus, it might push off-season surgery back if they really want to do it. It cuts into their time away from the game. That's getting to be a bigger and bigger thing, and perhaps it should be. I'm not sure there is an answer beyond what they're doing. I think it's pretty black and white. It's either have it or don't have it. I don't think there's an alternative that provides any more value than what they have right now that both the players and the owners would go along with.
Deontay Johnson, I believe, is not taking part in the OTAs, but that has opened the door for Chase Claypool to do more. What do you think Claypool needs to do to make a next step in his career?
Stay on his feet.
Yeah.
Chase Claypool, in my opinion, I don't think he showed the type of progress he should have from his rookie year to his second year.
Mm-hmm.
I know that Claypool lit up fantasy boards and everybody loved him. He had that streak of touchdown catches. He made some plays. He was not a fundamentally good receiver. And I don't necessarily expect them to be, especially if they're taking, the 9th or 10th receiver in a draft, as young as he is and being a rookie. But if he's going to succeed to a high level in the NFL, I would have hoped we would have seen him look a lot better last year than he did. And if anything, I'd say that he took a step back. Mm-hmm. Really underwhelmed with it isn't even an effort thing. I'm not going to get into the Vikings 2-minute drill situation.
Right.
I'm just speaking fundamentally as a player. His body control, his balance, this should have been refined. My opinion and I have no insight into this. Just watching him, though, it looks to me like he didn't really put work in. I'm sure he went out and ran. I'm sure that he was in physical condition, but I didn't see a great needle moving level of craft work. His routes didn't look any sharper. He didn't look any cleaner coming off the line. These are all things that you need to have as a high level receiver. To me, he still looked hitchy. He still looks slow. He's a big guy. Go up for 50-50 balls all day. That's great. But if you're a receiver in the NFL and you are literally catching only 50% of the passes that are thrown to you, you're not getting the ball a whole lot. So the difference that he makes is relatively nominal. And I'm not sure that should be the case, given his size, given the potential I think that he has. He's an HWS guy, though. Height, weight, and speed. He needs to become a better football player. I've seen things about him that I've liked. I've seen probably more to this point that I don't really like. But they banked on him developing if they took him in the second round because, oddly enough, the guy that he reminded me of, based on his college film, was his teammate, both at Notre Dame and now with Pittsburgh, Miles Boykin. And Boykin got bounced out of Baltimore in 3 years.
Right.
Claypool's not on that track, but Boykin also didn't develop any of those things. He's not a receiver. He was a height, weight, speed guy that they brought in. Turns out he's a better special teams player than he is a receiver. Not something you want out of a third-round pick. So for Claypool, he's got to get a lot more fluid. He's got to get a lot more balanced. That, to me, that's all football work. That's not going to the weight room and grind and all that. That's getting out on the field and moving your feet, catching a bunch of passes, running a bunch of routes, and obsessing over that for the duration of the offseason leading into training camp. Well, let's see where he's at this year. I'm certainly willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. They're not going to cut him. But I was disappointed last year overall. I felt he could have been a little bit further down the line in his development than he was from what we saw.
Getting Khan to be the GM and moving up, does that signal in some ways philosophically business as usual for the Steelers? And also, what do you think it means to get the player personnel guy from the Eagles to step into the number 2 spot?
It's really an interesting set of circumstances that came up with that. And keep that in mind. I mean, it's the news kind of broke from a couple different reporters at the same time. And the first one that I saw was about Weidl. I thought they hired Weidl. I was like, wait a minute, that's kind of odd. And then I saw assistant GM, right. But then I was even more confused because the Steelers don't have an assistant GM. They've never had an assistant GM. What that basically means is they're not hiring Brandon Hunt. In fact, Brandon Hunt is probably not going to be there. So to me, it kind of seemed like, to some degree, it's possible Khan said, this is my team. This is what I want to do as general manager, and Weidl's my guy. That happens. You see it more and more in sports. You want to bring in your people, and that isn't in any way an indictment against Brandon Hunt. It's more, perhaps, I don't know if this is what happened, but I wouldn't think Art Rooney would pick the first ever assistant GM in Steelers history to go along with the guy who's been in the building for 20 years. Mike Tomlin getting his coordinators given to him at age 34 for his first head coaching job and having never set foot in the building, I get that. I don't think that's what Rooney would do for Omar Khan. I feel it would be more like this is what Khan wanted to do. And Weidl you're not going to find a guy with a better resume for that position than Andy Weidl. He's excellent. Philadelphia does a great job of these kinds of things. I think Howie Roseman is one of the best general managers in the game. So to me, it makes sense the way that they are setting it up. At the same time, though, if we want to look at this as a business perspective, you're I don't want to call it the CEO, but for the sake of this example, your CEO does not handle one side of the business while somebody who you hired and is below you on the org chart handles another business. Everything reports to the general manager. His background is his background. He's there to manage the people who are now doing those things. He can be hands-on with caps and contracts the way that he has been, sure, but it's not as if the football people are going to operate in their own silo somewhere else, and he's not going to have any part of that. I don't think that's the case because, frankly, if you were going to do that, you may as well have named Mike Tomlin the general manager or not had an assistant general manager because Tomlin is going to be heavily involved in the football stuff as well. It's got to report into somebody, and that's going to be Khan. Khan has experience across all of it, really. I mean, he started off as a football guy. That was before he got into the business side. That versatility and that, kind of hands-on experience and certainly the native knowledge of that particular organization makes him an extremely attractive candidate. He was the odds-on favorite pretty much from the beginning of it all. And I think it lends itself well to, I don't want to call it a departure more than anything because it's hard to kind of figure out what the internal workings were with the Steelers. But the Steelers kind of set things up based on who they have as opposed to the title.
Right.
And they're forming the titles around who they have. Because keep in mind, Kevin Colbert was the player personnel director for 10 years before he was officially named the general manager. And he's the first general manager in title in Steelers history. Omar Khan was the first guy that they hired with a competitive hiring process for that position.
Right.
So putting an assistant GM along with that, just to me, it more suggests that it is, to your question, business as usual, but it's more about the people that they're bringing in. And I would be really excited about Weidl. I think he's a great hire, and it's indicative of they're squaring away perhaps a different look, a different type of evaluation of players. But you would have had to expect that. You have to get fresh. You have to get new when it comes to evaluation. You can't just use the same thing all the time. Eventually, it's going to kind of fall. And they had the opportunity to reevaluate it. I think they did a good job.
Well, I think that Khan, he's done various jobs, but I think he knows what his strengths happen to be, and that's the business side. Weidl has a different set of strengths compared to Khan, and I think that's why it was such a smart hire because they balance each other.
Exactly. That's what you want. That's modern leadership. They're going to ultimately work together, and they ultimately flow into Rooney. But there's no point in having a general manager if somebody lower on the org chart handles an aspect of the business independent of the general manager. Then they're on the same level. They're both reporting to Rooney if that's the case. That's not what the situation is. So it makes sense to get a highly respected local guy with some Steelers ties. Very classic Steelers hire, by the way. I'm not at all surprised. In fact, I've said this. The reason they cast as wide a net as they did for candidates was to see what else is out there. We don't know what else they're doing. We know that they are going to have a vacancy with the biggest position in the NFL, but we don't know what else they want to do with that. Plus, who's to say your general manager candidates are making the request that if you hire me, I want to hire this guy.
Right.
That just happened with Jackson or Byron Leftwich in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
He wanted to bring in somebody else. Jacksonville didn't want to move off their GM, and it didn't work out there.
Right.
We hope the best for Byron Leftwich, but Byron Leftwich felt if I'm going to be the head coach, this is the partnership that I want to have.
Yep.
If you aren't willing to do that, I'm not the best candidate for you. No issue with that at all. I'm not saying that Khan did that. I just think that it seems likely that as a general manager, you want assurance that your people can be brought in because they're going to do the things that fit with your vision and make, hopefully the most success out of this as possible. I think that Weidl speaks very well to exactly what they're trying to do. I think it also might suggest that perhaps Colbert did a bit more water lifting when it came to evaluations than we might have been led to believe. I don't think it's anything to do with Brandon Hunt because essentially what happened was the Steelers traded Weidl for Hunt. Hunt got hired by the Eagles in Weidl's old job. So I think both teams just kind of want a different perspective. And for the Steelers, it's a little bit off center perhaps from what they did, but you also had a general manager in place for 22 years. I mean, do we need to talk about the things that were happening with that team 22 years ago? They drafted Troy Edwards.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
things needed to change then. So
yes.
they've got an eye on the future. I think it's the right time to do what they're doing.
Finally, what's the next contract we should be taking a long, hard look at in terms of decisions?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I think the most obvious is Minka Fitzpatrick. I think It's such a crazy market for the safeties. In Seattle, with Jamal Adams, really did not help things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Jamal Adams is even a top 5 safety in the league, let alone still the highest paid. But unfortunately, considering where he is, what the Steelers gave up to get him, Minkah Fitzpatrick stands ahead of Jesse Bates in Cincinnati as far as the next guy up, and that's going to be a market-setting deal. Fitzpatrick is not as far along in his contract, but Bates is sitting around thinking, Minkah's up. He's the more splashy guy. He probably thinks he's a better player, which certainly can make that argument if you'd like. But they both know that they are pretty obviously better than Jamal Adams is. And if Adams' contract is where it is, they're going to want that plus a nominal percentage and probably a premium on top of that. The Steelers, I'm taking this cautiously because I would have said the exact same thing about T.J. Watt last year. I thought it was guaranteed that he was going to get tagged. Different business. Now they officially have different leadership. I think they lock Minkah up. I think they just give him a top safety contract, something a little bit above Jamal Adams because he's the backbone of your defense. He's only going to get better. They are being it's obvious, and this is something we've talked about a bunch, it's obvious that the Steelers are going secondary heavy within their defense. It seems by all logic they're going to play a lot of defensive backs throughout the year. Minkah is the one guy who probably isn't coming off the field. So if you have all of that among your secondary, which you might go 4, 5, 6 defensive backs deep consistently, the one guy who's in there needs to know absolutely everything. You need to make that investment. So for me, I think that they need to lock that up. I think that's their plan. I think that's what they're looking to do. Their cap position probably won't change a whole lot, just like it didn't for Watt last year. You might save $1 million this year, maybe $2 million. He's not going to make as much as Watt, I wouldn't think. But for the future, they have the space available. They need to start locking up their young core group. And I think they did that with Watt last year. I think they're going to do that with Minkah this year.
Well, we're fortunate we've got you locked up every Tuesday. Thank you so much, as always, my friend.
Definitely. As always, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.